Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. Today I'm going to go over the Brie Larson interview with InStyle and show why this is the woke point for the MCU. There's no denying it right now, and that this woke point is going to destroy all merit, slowly probably, but certainly destroy all merit in the MCU and in their movie making. And the thing is, you probably already watched a couple of videos about this interview, but when I look at an interview, I look at the background, who is saying what, why they are saying it, in what venue they are saying it, because I believe that all of these small little things in the background help bring out what they are saying much more. And so the first thing that I want to bring out that most people aren't recognizing, the only person that I saw that recognized this was the umbrella guy, and he recognized, just like I recognized, that the person doing this interview with Brie Larson is Sana Amanat. Now, if you're only familiar with the MCU and not with Marvel Comics, Sana Amanat is the second in command at Marvel Comics. She basically runs the show at Marvel Comics. She does the hiring, she does the firing, she sets the agenda, and trust me, oh trust me, it is an agenda over at Marvel Comics. And if you can believe what you hear through the grapevine, well, she was brought on as a diversity hire and put in that position to make Marvel Comics woke. And she did a bang-up job of that. And she is the one that is doing this interview. Now, the second thing that I want to take note of is the fact that these two women sat down for a meal and they talked during this meal for this interview. Now, if you're sitting down at a restaurant for a meal, which they are, that takes a lot of time. That's at least an hour that they were talking to each other. So Sana Amanat had a lot of information, I'm sure, to use for this article, but she only uses very sporadic quotes from Brie Larson. They are very specific quotes from Brie Larson. So how do you think that she whittled down to these specific quotes that she wanted to put out there from Brie Larson in this article? Well, it's very easy, because most of these quotes agree exactly to the decimal point with everything that Sana Amanat has been pushing over at Marvel Comics to make the entire brand woke. And the fact that she chose them and chooses to put them in this magazine to promote both Brie Larson and this movie, again, tells a lot about what is going on with Marvel at this point. So briefly, I want to go over a few things which basically connect these two women in their ideology. So you have in this article Brie Larson saying, "The movie was the biggest and best opportunity I could have ever asked for. It was like my superpower. This could be my form of activism, doing a film that can play all over the world and be in more places than I can be physically." So basically what Larson is saying here is that she wants to use this platform to promote her activism. And this is what Sana Amanat has been doing over at Marvel Comics for some time now. And after that quote, a little bit farther down, Sana Amanat in the article says, "And what can she do to make an impact? Much of her drive these days is using her celebrity as a platform to push for social change." Now, this quote is very telling. Push for social change is the phrase that she uses. Now, in many of the interviews and podcasts and things that Sana Amanat has done, she has talked about pushing ideas many times. She talks about pushing forward progressive ideas. And that, again, is what Larson here is saying. And how can she do that? Well, she goes on and says, "Larson was one of the first to adopt an inclusion rider in her contract, mandating diversity in casting and production staff." So mandating diversity. "And is a vocal advocate for representation in media. As she begins her global Captain Marvel press tour, she has pledged to spotlight other women behind the scenes, insisting on gender and racial parity in the press and wearing mostly female designers. Inclusion has to be a choice. It is not happening naturally," Larson says bluntly. "You really have to fight for it." All right, so we have all of these quotes here. You can see that Larson is going to push her agenda. She is using this role to be an activist, and she is going to push her agenda. And again, this is what Sana Amanat has been doing over at Marvel Comics for some time now. And Sana Amanat does it certainly in this article itself. When she talks about Captain Marvel, she calls her the ultimate feminist icon and the ultimate feminist hero. And here's something that I don't think anyone has been concentrating on with this interview. you have a little blurb where Sana Amanat tries to explain the history of Captain Marvel. She says this: "To understand the significance of this role, here's a swift lesson in Marvel history. Captain Marvel, whose civilian identity is Carol Danvers, has been known as Miss Marvel since 1968. In 2012, Miss Marvel's bathing suit-like attire was revamped into a red, blue, and gold uniform that alludes to Danvers' Air Force background, and she was reintroduced to audiences as Captain Marvel." Now, Sana Amanat knows very well the history of Captain Marvel. I have heard her on many podcasts and many interviews talking about the problematic history of Captain Marvel, because she has been around since 1968. So you can see that she specifically wants to tell everyone the significance of the role of Captain Marvel, and so she gives this little blurb of history, which she knows very well. However, this is not the history of Captain Marvel. If you know anything about the comics, this is a straight up lie. Okay, she is not representing the truth here whatsoever. Carol Danvers was not Miss Marvel from 1969 to 2012. She went through a myriad of different identities and different costumes. She was known as binary at one point. She was known as Warbird at one point. She was simply a super spy, almost like Black Widow at one point, and didn't wear a costume at all. There are many things that she had done in her background and in her history between 1968 and 2012 that wasn't Miss Marvel. But of course, the reason why Sana Amanat is putting this in there specifically is because she wants to make this clear divide, or appear like there is a clear divide, that there was a Miss Marvel since 1968 to 2012. She was called Miss Marvel, so that's like a little pat on the head to women, so she was being treated in a misogynistic way, and she was wearing a bathing suit-like attire. And so here you have Sana Amanat saying, you know, Miss Marvel before 2012, well, she was an oppressed woman. That's what she was. But after 2012, she was revamped into a uniform that looked like Air Force attire and then was put back into circulation for the Marvel audience. So she's trying to straight up lie to the audience here and say that from that 68 to 2012 point, she was an oppressed woman. She was not anything that anyone could look up to. But now we have this empowered woman. And that's what she is now. She is the ultimate feminist hero. She is the ultimate feminist icon. And then you have Larson herself identifying with Captain Marvel, saying she doesn't apologize for herself. I felt like that was a really valuable trait. And then you have Sana Amanat talking about Larson enduring physical and mental training in order to play Captain Marvel. And a little later on, you have Larson talking about how she played Captain Marvel and how she, quote, wanted to hold on to that cockiness and the sense of ownership. So here you have Sana Amanat portraying Larson, and Larson portraying herself in her own words as this empowered woman, of course, and she wants the audience who is reading this article to connect that back in their mind to the fact that 2012 Miss Marvel was a feminist icon. Prior to that, she was something, again, that was just a miss who traipsed around in a bathing suit. So having said all that, I want to get back to my main point, which is how this is going to destroy merit within the Marvel MCU. And it has to do with the ideology behind all of this that they are both saying in this article about their activism, how they want to have more representation of basically non-white, non-male people on the movie set and all of this kind of stuff. And a lot of people in their videos are asking this question. How is she not being racist? How is she not being sexist? She is trying to say that she wants to make the world a better place by getting rid of such things as racism and sexism, and so she wants more people included. But if she is excluding a certain race, which is white people, and a certain gender, which is men, isn't she just being racist and sexist? And most people can't really connect those two ideas. How does that fit together? Well, briefly, this is how it fits together. All of these ideas, they come from identity politics, which is basically a watered down version of cultural Marxism. So these people are socialist communists, and I use those two terms, yes, interchangeably, because if you look at the older documents that describe and set up the idea of what communism actually was, those two words were used interchangeably. And that's what these two women are talking about. They want to have and work towards having this utopian society in the future where everybody is equal and everybody has the exact exact same amount and the exact same of everything. And how do they know in their ideology that this can come about? Well, because they believe that long ago in history, people actually lived this way. This is the way people were originally. Everybody was the same, everybody was equal, everybody had exactly the same amount, and everybody lived in a utopia. And in their ideology, how did that fall? Well, that fell because you had people and groups of people usurping some of the power, because it's all about power. If you read this article, you'll notice that it's all about power, even here. You have some people usurping the power of others and collecting and using the power of others in order to give themselves more than they should have. And this became a generational thing by these bad people setting up institutions in order to rob these other people of power and usurp their power and use it for themselves. And what are some of these institutions? Well, some of these institutions would be whiteness. Some of these institutions would be maleness. You see, that is what their ideology states. And so if they're doing stuff like Brie Larson is talking about here, getting a more diverse cast, which is to say less white people, less males, which is quite specifically what she's talking about, she thinks that this is not going to be sexist or racist. Why? Because white people and males have used these institutions to rob the power of these other races and other genders for some time now. So these other genders and other races, they are the oppressed, and these white males, they are the oppressors. And so in order to bring about their utopia, you need to rebalance things, because Larson here talks about balance a lot in this article. You need to rebalance things. How do you rebalance things? Well, you take away from the men, you take away from the white people, and you give extra to the people who aren't men, you give extra to the people who aren't white, and so that's how you redress this balance. And so when they exclude white people and men from their sets, from their movie making, and bring in more people of color, more women, all of these things, they think that, no, this is not being sexist, this is not being racist. You can't be racist against white people, you can't be sexist against men. Why? Because the only reason they have what they have is because they stole it away from the oppressed. And so you need to take it away from them and give it back to the oppressed. And so in doing that, you are certainly not being racist, you are certainly not being sexist. All you are doing is redressing the balance. Because white people and men and people in control, they have what is known as privilege. And their usurping of this power, this is what they transformed it into. They transformed it into privilege so that they can make their status more than it should be. But the thing is this. You can take privilege and substitute it for another word. And that word would be merit. Now, when you and I and normal people talk about merit, we talk about it in a good way, that it's a good thing. We want an industry, whether it be a comic industry or a television industry or a movie industry, we want it based upon merit. But when you say merit to people like this, they hear privilege. They think that you are trying to set up or shore up a system of privilege which oppresses people. That's specifically what merit is in their minds. And so how do you have this working out for Marvel Comics? Well, this is what it works out for Marvel Comics under Sana Amanat. You have only two kinds of stories. All right? You have a story that specifically pushes this political agenda, and then you have a story which is garbage. And that's all that you get. And here's why. Because if you're not going to push the political agenda, if you're just going to write a story, it has to be garbage. Why? Because if you write something that is great, if you have a story that is great, well, obviously, that story is above the other stories. And if it is above the other stories, it has merit. But merit is equal to privilege, and privilege is evil. Therefore, you can't have a story that has merit. If you write stories that are great and continue to do so, they will get rid of you because you obviously are using your privilege to do so, and that is being brought forth and shown by the merit that you are putting into your work. And here you have Brie Larson talking about a system that she wants to implement which is contrary to merit. She wants to hire people based upon their genitalia. She wants to hire people based upon their skin color. She wants to hire people based upon, I'm sure, their political ideology. This is not a system based on merit. This is an anti-merit system, and this is what she is trying to introduce into the Marvel MCU. Now, someone might say, she's just an actress. There's no way she's going to have any control over the MCU. But you have to remember a few things. Number one, the MCU has said that Captain Marvel will be the new figurehead for this new phase of the MCU. And you have Brie Larson or some other person playing Captain Marvel in at least 6 upcoming movies. That's a lot of work. And if it's Brie Larson and she has an inclusion rider, which she is sticking into all of her contracts now, saying that you have to have a diverse number of people working on all of the movies that she touches, well, that's an anti-merit system to all of those 6 movies that she is supposedly going to be in. Secondly, concentrating on the character of Captain Marvel itself, you have the person who runs the MCU, Kevin Feige, I can't pronounce it. And he specifically said that when they were making this character, this Captain Marvel character for the MCU, they only concentrated on the Captain Marvel 2012 forward and did not include any of that old history. And from 2012 forward is the woke Captain Marvel. Quite specifically in the comics, that's what she is. And to top it all off, I want to bring in a quote from Brie Larson that she did with Total Films. Now, she has said in this interview with InStyle that she was attracted to this role and made it her own because she wanted to use it as a form of activism. But here's what she says in the Total Films interview. She says that when she was thinking about joining the MCU, and this is her quote, "I realized what they were trying to do with this movie was basically everything I ever wanted on this crazy international scale." So Brie Larson wanted to take this role as a form of activism. And she realized that this would be her form of activism, and she could do that because, as she says here, she realized that what they were trying to do with this movie was basically everything she ever wanted. And they are allowing her to do all of this to control, to some extent, how the movies are made with this rider that she's putting in all of her contracts. And the icing on the cake is you have Sana Amanat here just beaming at the fact that this woman, Brie Larson, is just reflecting everything that she has pushed out in Marvel Comics for the last 5-6 years at least. And here's where I can hear someone in the background saying, well, they can have all of these plans to do this that they want. Disney simply won't allow it. It's a big company. They know better than to allow this to happen to the MCU. And to that, I would say I want to bring in something that Sana Amanat has championed over in her podcast. And that was an interview that she did with a woman who works for the sports channel that Disney owns. I think it's ESPN. And what she talked about in that podcast was she is implementing this exact thing that Brie Larson is trying to implement here. She implemented the exact thing over at ESPN. She has this program to promote the hiring of non-white, non-male people into the sports channel in order to make it more diverse, and it was going swimmingly for her, and she has no opposition whatsoever. Quite the contrary, Disney was supporting her in doing this. So no, Disney has already allowed this exact thing that Brie Larson is talking about in this article to happen over at one of its major companies. So the biggest takeaway here is this. If you are a person who believes in the American dream, if you are a person who believes that they can rise their heads above the other people by hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, if you're a person who believes that you can put your nose to the grindstone and you can just by the sweat of your brow rise and make something of yourself greater than everyone else around you, if you believe in any kind of system of merit, according to the ideological system of these two women, if you believe in any of those systems of merit, you are evil. That is the ideology that one has implemented over at Marvel Comics already, and that is the ideology that the other, with the help of Disney itself, is imposing on this new phase of the MCU. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.